Who decided beauty ads need this much drama?
Elf Cosmetics did. Their new commercial called Melissa is an absurdly funny telenovela starring Melissa McCarthy, TV doctor Nicholas Gonzalez, and iconic telenovela villain Itati Cantoral. But the real star, Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil.
Melissa McCarthy fully commits by even rolling the R's with the Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. It's very funny.
Yeah, watch the full episode of their new Elfa novela on soyunbaño.com.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. If you listen only to the headlines of history, April 1945 sounds quite simple. The war in Europe was ending. Nazi Germany was collapsing. The Red Army was marching into Berlin. It was the final act of the most destructive conflict humanity has ever known, and for millions, a moment of long-awaited justice. But history, as always, is more complicated than that, because alongside liberation came something darker. Alongside victory came vengeance, and alongside the fall of Hitler's Reich came one of the most disturbing episodes of mass misconduct in modern warfare. This is the story of the fall of Berlin and what the Red Army did when it finally arrived. Today's History Brief will cover some recent history news. A quick word from our sponsors.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on what your kids are spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/iHeart.
This day in history. On February 24, 1803, the Supreme Court issued its landmark decision in Marbury v. Madison, establishing the principle of judicial review. The ruling gave the court the power to declare acts of Congress unconstitutional. On February 24, 1942, the Voice of America broadcast its first program. The service became a key instrument of public diplomacy during the Cold War and beyond. Story of the day. By the spring of 1945, Germany was finished. The Western Allies were crossing the Rhine. American and British bombers had reduced entire cities to rubble. And from the east, the Red Army, hardened, brutalized, and relentless, was closing in. For the Soviet Union, this war had been apocalyptic. More than 27 million Soviet citizens were dead. Entire villages had been erased. Millions had been starved, enslaved, and murdered under Nazi occupation. When Soviet soldiers crossed into Germany in early 1945, they did so not merely as conquerors, but as survivors. Many carried with them images of burned homes, executed families, and mass graves. As one officer later wrote, "We were not coming in as guests." By April 1945, Berlin was a city of ghosts. Its population had swelled with refugees fleeing the Red Army's advance. Food was scarce, electricity unreliable, fear was everywhere. Inside the city, Adolf Hitler was already finished, hiding in his bunker beneath the Chancellery, issuing orders to armies that no longer existed. On April 16th, Soviet forces launched their final assault. More than 2.5 million Red Army soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and artillery pieces, smashed into the German defenses. The Battle of Berlin was not a battle so much as an annihilation. Street by street, building by building, room by room. On May 2nd, Berlin surrendered. The red flag flew over the Reichstag. For the Soviet Union, it was the ultimate symbol of victory, proof that the country Hitler had vowed to destroy had instead crushed him. For Berlin's civilians, the nightmare was not over. In many ways, it was just beginning. As Red Army units poured into Berlin and into Eastern Germany more broadly, discipline collapsed. What followed was not a handful of isolated crimes, but really a wave. Historians estimate that hundreds of thousands and likely over 1 million German women were raped in the weeks and months following the Soviet advance. Girls as young as 12, women in their 70s, often assaulted repeatedly and sometimes by dozens of men. Some victims were murdered afterward, others killed themselves. The German writer Martha Hillers, who documented the events in her diary, A Woman in Berlin, wrote, "Rape was an everyday occurrence, and nobody talked about it. It was not chaos alone, it was tolerated." The reasons are deeply uncomfortable and inseparable from the war itself. First, there was revenge. Soviet soldiers had seen what the Wehrmacht and the SS had done in the USSR: mass shootings, burned villages, starvation policies, and extermination. Many soldiers believed that German civilians deserved collective punishment. Second, there was the dehumanization. Years of propaganda had portrayed Germans as beasts, not human, but more enemies outside the moral universe. And the third, there was impunity. While Soviet law technically prohibited rape, enforcement was inconsistent and often non existent. Officers frequently looked the other way. Some even participated themselves. Marshal Gregory Zhukov, the commander of the Soviet forces in Berlin, later dismissed reports of mass rape as quite exaggerated, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. At the top of the Soviet system, of course, stood Joseph Stalin. Stalin was informed of what was happening on the ground. His response was quite chilling. According to contemporaries, Stalin waved off concerns, asking rhetorically, "What is so awful about a soldier having some fun after such hardships?" Whether those exact words were spoken or paraphrased, the message was clear. There would be no reckoning for the mass rape. It is important to say this clearly. Not every Red Army soldier committed crimes. Some officers tried to impose discipline. Some soldiers protected civilians. Some were horrified by what they witnessed. But the scale of abuse was so vast and so widely tolerated that it became systematic. In Berlin hospitals, doctors quietly treated rape victims without recording the cause. Women disguised themselves as elderly. Others smeared ash on their faces. Some sought protection by attracting themselves to individual soldiers in hopes that it would avoid gang assaults. Survival, not dignity, became the goal. For decades, this story was buried. In East Germany, it was forbidden to even discuss it. In the Soviet Union, it was unthinkable. The Red Army was officially remembered only as liberators, heroic, noble, beyond reproach. But history does not work that way. Victory does not erase crime, and suffering does not grant moral immunity. The same army that destroyed Auschwitz and toppled Hitler also inflicted enormous trauma on civilians who had no part in Nazi crimes. Both of these truths coexist. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. Celebrations erupted in London, Paris, New York, and Moscow. But in Berlin, many women marked peace not with joy, but with exhaustion and grief. The violence slowly subsided, not because of justice, though, but because discipline was reimposed once occupation structures solidified. There would be no trials, no apologies, no acknowledgement. For decades, the victims lived with their trauma in silence. The History Brief. Today in History News, we're digging up a piece of childhood from Victorian London, not in a dusty textbook, but literally from the ground beneath a city street. Archaeologists working ahead of development projects in East London recently uncovered a surprising number of artifacts once used by children, and one of them still bears the actual scribbles of its young owners. at a site that centuries ago was a home to a free school for impoverished boys and nearby almhouses. Researchers from the Museum of London Archaeology found marbles, a pencil, and a fragment of a reusable slate tablet, a common classroom tool in Victorian era. Kids would use chalk or slate pencils to copy lessons from the blackboard or practice handwriting, and then erase the surface to start over. The particular slate still shows faint letters and marks, offering a rare, direct glimpse into everyday schoolwork of children more than a century ago. It is not every day that we find archaeological objects we can directly link to children, the Museum of London Archaeology has noted, explaining how unusual it is to uncover items tied so vividly to youthful play and learning. Alongside the school slate and pencils were ceramic marbles, known as alleys, some still decorated with colorful swirls. These little spheres were likely lost during games, perhaps tumbling into a brick linen drain where they stayed buried until now. The larger dig at what will soon become an industrial park has also revealed foundations of buildings ranging from a chapel to row houses, even remnants of Roman-era London, illustrating the layers of history beneath the modern city. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.